All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for the last session of the marketing track of Momentum. We've got one session after this next week. That is the practicum. But this week we are all focused on data analytics, SEO, search engine marketing, and website optimization. So without further ado, Mackenzie, I will let you introduce yourself and kick off your presentation. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen so I can pull up my presentation here. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. This is my second time speaking to the Momentum group, and it's always a great group with a lot of good conversation. So if at any point you want to throw a question into the chat or unmute yourself and interrupt me and ask something, please do. Data analytics is a very big topic, and I've tried to make an attempt here to whittle it down to this presentation and make it digestible. For some of you, this might be a little basic. For some of you, it might be your first introduction. So hopefully everybody will be able to get something out of this. But first, a little bit about myself. So my name is Mackenzie Farone. I am a certified digital marketing professional, or CDMP, through the American Marketing Association and also the Digital Marketing Institute. So dual certified by those two organizations. I currently work as the manager of the Marketing and Communications Department at Carmuse Americas. Most people haven't heard of us. It's a mining company. It's a big global mining company that's downtown Pittsburgh. And I also own MF Digital Marketing. So that's my own kind of consulting / freelance digital marketing business. I focus on helping small businesses, especially minority or women-owned businesses, to get their digital marketing plans going. And I'm also the former VP of Digital Marketing for the American Marketing Association, Pittsburgh chapter, and now I'm on the board serving as the member at large. And also I'm the mother to 2 children. So like I mentioned, when I come in, I do have the door locked, so no like naked children are gonna run in after their bath, which has happened to me before some of these presentations. But you might hear some like giggling and splashing around depending on how much fun they're having in there. So what are we going to talk about over the course of the next hour-ish or so, a little bit less? I'm going to give an overview of data analytics in marketing, specifically how it's used, the most common types of data analytics. We're going to talk about how do you determine what KPIs and data do you need to know to be able to use it effectively in a marketing campaign, and we'll go over some examples. Like I said, this is a very broad, overarching thing to talk about, and especially when we're talking about all of the things that are under the umbrella of digital marketing, you can talk about data for days. So I'm going to focus on the things that I think might be most important for you to know going into some of the other presentations this week. So we'll talk specifically about examples of using data for your website and social media, maybe some audience creation or email marketing if we have time, so that you can see some real world applications of how data analytics is used. And then I'm also going to go through some helpful tools that as a digital marketer using data, I use on a daily basis in my job. Some that are free, some that are very inexpensive, that are really important to know about as you're building campaigns and trying to utilize data. And then we'll end kind of with a broader macro scope of data analytics. So we'll talk about big data a little bit and what that is and how we can use it, and also talk about some of the data analytics trends that are going to be happening in 2023 and beyond. And there's a lot of them, so we'll talk about some ones that I'm sure you guys are somewhat familiar with right now. But let's start off by level setting with what is data analytics. So when we're saying data analytics, what do we mean? And at its heart, it's really just the ability to determine patterns or useful information that you can use to make decisions, right? And that decision might be how you form a marketing campaign, or it might be how do you tweak a campaign, or it could be, was my campaign successful or not, and how do I prove that? The biggest thing with data from a marketing perspective or a design perspective for that matter is being able to process this data to provide actionable insights of what you can do moving forward to be consistently improving what you're doing. That is the really great part, especially of digital marketing, right? If we think about it in terms of traditional marketing, once you've designed, bought, and paid for, a print ad, for example, it's out there. And you can't really tweak or change anything until you pay to run that next print ad, right? With digital, we can use data in real time from day to day, hour to hour, to stop and see what's working, make tweaks and changes to our campaigns to make sure that they can be as successful as possible. So at the end of the day, data analytics is really helping us to eliminate as many guesses as we possibly can, because we don't want to guess as we're building and paying for these campaigns. We want to know. We want to choose the best marketing strategy. We want to know how do we develop further to get more sales or reach the KPIs that we're going for. And data is what's going to help us get there. So then we ask the question, okay, why data? Why is that the thing that can help me get there? Why is it going to help me have a more successful campaign? And I think that RJ would probably agree with me as a data and digital marketer as well. And that in the marketing field, that those that know how to properly collect, synthesize, understand, and use their data are always miles ahead of the companies that choose to not focus on it. Data is truly one of the most underutilized tools at the disposal of most companies today. And most of that is because they don't either want to invest in the tools for data analytics that they need to really, like I said, synthesize and collect it, or they just don't understand the gold mine that they're sitting on. And that's why it takes marketers like me and like RJ and like you all on this call learning about this to come in and make that change happen to be able to use data. So this is a really big skill that is lacking in companies today. And if you can figure out how to be the person that knows how to use this data for actionable improvements in the way the business operates, you're going to be invaluable to that company. And at the end of the day, too, when this data analysis is done correctly, businesses can know more about consumers than they know themselves, right? They can know your purchasing patterns, your sleep patterns, your, if we're getting into big data, like I said, we'll talk about at the end. But, we can even talk about in the next slide where data comes from, how we are giving up a lot of information about ourselves and our patterns and our behaviors that then marketers can use to be able to sell to us. And while that sounds a little big brothery, we'll talk about at the end, it's really actually beneficial for us. So like I mentioned, let's talk about where does this data come from? Some of the things are very straightforward, right? Things like cookies, for example. So if you are on a website or a social media site, a cookie will be placed on your computer that tracks where you're doing. What are you clicking on? What pages are you visiting? What are you interacting with? And what are you engaging? And then me, as the owner of that site, can see all that information in an aggregate to decide how is my website or my platform performing for me. But there's other sources of data as well, like our CRM information. So CRM is a customer relationship management tool, and it's usually populated by your sales team. So they'll come in and put information about their customers, who they've talked to in the field, what equipment people are using, or what products they're looking to purchase. And they'll be able to give marketing valuable information about the actual customer to know how to market to them later. But there's also things that all of us, essentially as consumers, can't really now get away from that provide data on our behaviors, what we like, what we don't like, what we do, what we know, pain points that we have. And those are attached to all of us all the time, right? So it's our cell phones, it's our smartwatches, it's our tablets, it's the apps that we use, right? And this has become so commonplace for all of us to give up our data in return for the convenience and things of the stuff, the electronics that we like. Also things like e-commerce platforms where we buy things online. And then there's also some other things that you might not think of, like future trend analysis or predictive modeling. So taking historical information from the past and using that data analytics mind to be able to discern what we think is going to happen in the future.
A couple days.
Sorry, does someone have a question?
Who's the tree?
No, okay. So think about, like I said, how many times per day we're giving away little pieces of data about ourselves. It's just the reality of the world that we live in now, right? It's very difficult to get away from, but we can use it to our advantage as marketers, because what this data tells us is essentially everything that we might need to know about who we're trying to reach or who we're trying to sell to. It can tell us things like purchasing behavior. It can help us identify trends of our different individual personas or groups that we're interacting with. It can tell us really simple things that can have huge impacts on campaigns, like the best time of day to engage with someone, right? The best time of day to send an email or to make a post, or to make a phone call. It can tell us what's working on our website and what's not, so we can make those changes. It can tell us the needs of the personas that we have, or what ads can put in front of you, or even from a design perspective, it can tell us what fonts should we use, what colors should we use, what pictures should we use, right? Data can tell us so many different things if we use it correctly. But I'll take a minute away from that to answer the question ahead of time that I always get asked when I do this presentation. And after this slide, when I talk about how our devices can give a lot of data on us, which is something that we all know, right? There's nobody on this call that doesn't know that already. But a lot of times I get the question of, hey, is my Alexa like always listening to me? Or is my Google Home always listening? Because I had a conversation with my friend the other day about needing a new, I don't know, new dishwasher. And all of a sudden, all I'm seeing are ads online for dishwashers. Like, what's going on? So the answer to that is yes. These things that we have on our hands and in our pockets and in our homes are listening to us all the time. What you will hear from the manufacturers of these products is that while they're listening all the time, they're not necessarily recording or spying on you, which is what some people think, but more so it's listening for trigger words to know when you want it to engage with you. So when we say something like, you know, hey Siri or hey Google, it's listening for those things to interact with you. And what they will tell you, and they've actually gone in front of Congress and said this, is that their algorithms for predicting what people want and their ability to aggregate data from multiple sources, for example, a Google Home is listening within your home, but it's also tied to your Gmail account, to your AdWords account, to your Google searches, to every piece of data it can possibly collect on you. And so because of that, they have, as they say, an algorithm that is so insanely accurate about you that it knows that you are probably, in the market for, say, a new dishwasher, right? I think there's a lot of arguments that I hear from people where they don't believe that. I don't know if it's wholly accurate or not. All I can tell you is that I get that question a lot. And so I looked up the answer a long time ago. And I can tell you that that is what they will say in front of Congress, at least. Oh, and RJ said I turned on his Google and Siri. So sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear it either, but my speaker keeps going on and off too. Hopefully that's not annoying anybody. So let's talk about the three main types of data analytics. So there's descriptive. Descriptive analytics refers to exactly what we talked about, the interpretation of the historical data patterns, things that have happened. So it answers that question, what has happened, so that I can make tweaks and adjustments in the future to what I'm doing. So an example would be using demographic data like locations of people that are engaging to improve the keyword search effectiveness for one of my AdWords campaigns. Then there's prescriptive. So prescriptive analysis or analytics refers to the application and testing, right? So it's understanding more so, okay, I've noticed something is happening with this data. Why did it happen? Or what should I do? And the perfect example of this is A/B testing ad copy, right? Any marketer will tell you that you should A/B test any new ads, A/B test emails, to figure out which one's going to resonate better with your core audience. So it'll tell us, okay, we know that using this font works better because we've proven it. Predictive is the really interesting one, especially as of late, because predictive analytics refers to the process of using current or historical data combined with statistical techniques to try to understand the likelihood of something happening. So what will happen and when will it happen? So it's not using what has actually happened, it's not using what a person has actually done, but instead it's using data from history to tell you up front, before you've ever run anything, what will happen. So an example would be using a determined lifetime customer value to determine how much revenue a campaign will net. And I will tell you, I just did this in my job not that long ago, when I was trying to figure out new AdWords campaigns that we had never run before. And I was able to get some historical data on what the cost would be for those specific demographics and audiences I was trying to go after, and what the conversion rates were on our website and several different data points. I was able to pretty accurately build back exactly what I was going to need to spend to get the amount of leads that I was looking for on the site to generate a specific amount of revenue. And that makes it a lot easier for me to be able to go to my bosses and tell them what budget I need, because I can tell them, you let me have 50 and I'll earn you 125, right? So with all of the data that's out there, how do I know what data I need, right? It's, you can get really lost in the ether of all the data that could potentially be available to you. And a lot of people get stuck in that, and they spend too much time because they think they need these big reports with lots of charts and lots of numbers, when really it's not telling them much, right? So I'm a big proponent of knowing what data you need up front and having that plan, and only reporting on the things that will help you be successful. So how do you know what data you need? Well, it's determined by a handful of things, of top of which is, your audience, your strategy, and your goals, right? If I'm trying to put together a report on website key performance indicators based on conversions, right? If I need to know how many product sales have come from my website, I might not need to track things like, I don't know, downloads on blog articles, all right? Maybe I've looked at the customer journey and I know that that's not on the customer journey to a conversion, right? So I don't need to spend my time looking at that to prove this particular goal. But you have to ask yourself a lot of questions as you're building out your data structure and what it's going to look like for your campaigns. Like, where is your audience providing data about its behaviors, right? Where is it going to sit? What's the best way to gather that data? And do you need new tools in place to be able to collect the information appropriately? What data do you need to prove and track success, right? So what does success look like to you? What's that, 4 or 5 really strong KPIs that will indicate success of what you're doing, and work them back to figure out what data do I need to collect to make sure that that's happening. So here's just a list. We don't have to go through each one. We don't have enough time to do all that, but some common ways that data analytics is used every day in marketing, right? You can use it to figure out pricing, what your competitors are doing and how you can compete better in the market research, journey mapping. All of these things all have components of data, and this is not an exhaustive list, right? There could be hundreds more ways that we can use marketing or analytics in marketing on a daily basis. So let's really break down that process then of determining what data you need, right? So we kind of talked about it in generalities, how do we approach it? But let's talk about like a real approach that you can take to make sure that you're getting the data that you need and that it's usable. So the first step is always going to be to discuss the goals, right? If you're undertaking a new campaign, what are the goals of that campaign? Because those are going to determine what your key performance indicators are and what data tracking you need. So are you looking for things like downloads of a white paper or improvements in bounce rate on certain pages? Are you looking for the number of conversions to a sale to increase, right? But when you're doing those things, it's really important to focus on only a few most impactful KPIs, like I said, instead of looking at all metrics at once. It's especially with something like Google Analytics, for example. It is so easy to get down into the weeds of that information. But if it's not going to help you take an action or to prove success, then it's not worth it. One of my biggest pet peeves as a digital marketer, a lot of my background is in search engine optimization. And one of the biggest things to me that just tears me apart, and RJ, I don't know if you feel this way as well, is when someone hands me a report that says, we have ranked for 100 keywords so far. Great. That doesn't tell me the whole story. That's incomplete data, right? What was the search volume of those keywords? Are those keywords applicable to our audience, right? Those are the things that are going to prove success of your SEO campaigns. If you can rank for 100 keywords, but nobody's searching for them, it doesn't matter, right? So making sure you know upfront, what are the goals of what you're trying to do and how are you going to track that? Also, the big one here at the end is determining appropriate timeframes to try to hit those goals. So when are you going to check data? There's a lot of data that has to deal with trends, right? You don't need to necessarily be in there every single day checking the traffic of a web page. You need to look at it in a trend. Are we trending in the right direction to meet our goals? Or for the opposite of that, if you never set a time frame, then you might be collecting all of this data, but you're not doing anything with it because you're just collecting. And like we said in the beginning, the most important thing is to be actionable with your data. And if you never set a time frame, then you can't set a time to be actionable. So let's use some examples here. So if I was going to set up an email campaign, for example, I'm going to think about what are my KPIs, what's going to prove that I'm being successful here, what data do I need to start my campaign, and what data do I need to track to show success, right? So let's say if my key performance indicators for my email campaign were click-through rate, conversion rate, the revenue that I generated, and I also want to know the number of unsubscribes, right? So yeah, maybe I got a lot of conversions, but maybe I also lost a lot of people off my list and I want to fix that as well. So the data, some of the data that I might need to start that campaign, I might need to know audience targeting data, right? So who are my demographics that I'm trying to reach? How can I build these audiences to reach the right people? Then can I take that audience information? So I need to know, what are they interested in? Maybe what location they're in. Where am I going to get that information? Well, I'm probably going to get that from my CRM, right? I'm going to know that information from my customer relationship management tool. I might also want to know the time and day of the week from my buying behavior data that they're going to be most likely to open that email, right? Because I want to send it at the most opportune time for them. And then I might also want to work with my designer, my email designer, and know the user design data, right? So what visuals, what setup is going to be most likely to get these KPIs, to get a conversion, to generate revenue. And then once I've launched my campaign, I need to also know that the data that I can use to track the success of that campaign. So total revenue generated, what was the total number of purchases with email as a source? The email button clicks, right? How successful was that generating traffic to those purchasing pages? And which products were more likely to convert, for example? So you can see how in something even as simple as just an email campaign can have a lot of data points that you can use to help make it as successful as possible. So this is just, and I'm happy to send this out as well, this presentation, if anybody wants it, I can send it to RJ to disseminate. But this is a really good chart, just kind of talking through how you determine those initial KPIs. And we talked about this, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but this is a really good thing. I have this in my office, in my desk, right? Because we talk about every new campaign, we have a conversation around what are the key performance indicators here and how are we tracking it. And so this is a really good way to remember what those steps are. So now we'll take a deeper dive into some of those few areas like I talked about at the beginning, because we can dive into a lot of different aspects of data if we wanted to. but I want to focus on these two, website and social media for now. So here's just an example of some of the website analytics that are usually tracked on a routine basis, just to better understand how is your website performing. And these are very general, is what I will say, very general. And of course would be dependent on what your goals are for your site. But simple things like click-through rates, exit pages, right? Where are people dropping off? What content is not working for them? The number of new visitors versus the number of returning visitors. And a big one for us is, the number of conversions or goals met. If we have goals for our website, whether that's download of materials, lead generation, whatever it happens to be, maybe it's time on our blog, whatever it is, I can easily track those through my website analytics. And you can get very deep down in the weeds, like I said, in a lot of this analytics. And we'll kind of talk about some of those tools later on. But let's start with an example. So we're, halfway through the presentation. It's 6:30 right now. And so I wanted to get you guys in to use the chat a little bit. So I'm going to give you an example now that we've kind of talked about this process, and just get some thoughts from you on, what some KPIs would be to track in this scenario. So let's say, for example, we have a business A, who has challenged you to increase e-commerce revenue by 25% in 2023, right? Very tall order. They know that their email marketing works really well to drive business to their e-commerce platform. And also they know that if they can keep a customer on their website for longer than 60 seconds, they're much more likely to purchase. So to try to track how this is working for them, what are some KPIs that they could track to determine whether or not they're improving their e-commerce platform's performance? Or what data do you think they would need to start tracking to even know upfront if they're successful in what they're doing? So I'll give you guys a minute to read through this and then put in the chat, if you can, what you think, even just one KPI or piece of data they might need to know if they're successful. Oh man, is everybody thinking, or did I just lose everyone? Okay, we'll give you some time to think. Yeah, for sure. A/B testing to see what web designs keep people on the site longer. Absolutely. If we know that 60 seconds is a data point that will help us, trying to keep them there as best we can. Yeah, click-through rate. Yeah, time spent on website could potentially be confused with customers that are idle. So Sophia, that's true for sure. That does happen where and analytics does have some ways to counteract that. So a lot of times it won't start actually tracking a session until you've made some kind of click or engagement somewhere on the page. But also with that, it will time out after a certain period of time and will begin a new session when they re-engage, move their mouse, whatever. But it's still, yeah, it's still not great. It's not perfect for sure. Yeah, it's interesting what Google Analytics does. All right, anything else? Yeah, Andrew, perfect. Yeah, how many people complete a sale after being directed from the email, right? That's how we're going to know, are we increasing the revenue or not, right? And was that email campaign maybe that we undertook a successful one or not? So yeah, great job, you guys. All right. So here's some ones that I came up with. All your answers were great, but some of the KPIs might be the number of sessions with an average amount of time on the site less than 60 seconds and seeing if that increases, right? So are our efforts increasing that average time on site? Are the number of users who visit more than 2 pages on the site increasing, let's say, perhaps, so we're engaging them further? Like we said, number of people acquired from email source, is that increasing? And then conversions on site. So you guys nailed a lot of those KPIs. And like we mentioned, some of the campaign data that we might need to make sure this is as successful as possible could be the most likely days and times that someone's going to open an email. Maybe it's the days and times when we know our personas have free time to shop. The devices and browsers they use, so we can make sure that the email campaign we're creating looks the best and can be very well viewed on those different email platforms. Or those different devices, right? Maybe we customize it for mobile if we think people are most likely to go on mobile, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can use. So let's switch gears a little bit and go into the organic social media analytics that are usually tracked. And I'm just going to focus on organic for now. There's always paid social media as well. It's a little bit different. But I hear a lot of people, ask a lot of questions about social media because it can be very tricky. So again, you can really get down into the weeds. I'm not a social media specialist. To be honest with you, I've finally gotten to a point in my career where I don't have to be a content manager for social media, which I was for the large chunk in the beginning of my career. It was not something I enjoyed doing. I did it begrudgingly. So I'm grateful to not be doing this anymore, but some people are absolutely amazing at it. And understanding the data that's behind social media is really how you see these people, companies and influencers and all of this stuff. The reason that they're getting to the followership that they are is data, right? They understand what the people who follow them want to see, and they know what types of posts get the most engagement. And they understand, at a very deep level, what's going to make that money roll in or what's going to give them the goal that they have for their social media. So maybe that's engagement, maybe it's lead generation, maybe it is whatever, like we talked about. But they know, the most successful people know what to do to reach those KPIs that they've set. Even influencers, right, are using data. So they want to see followers and follower growth rates, especially, right? So if you can see how many followers you have and is the rate at which you're growing that follower list increasing, or is it slowing down? The engagement rates and engagement rate per time and day, right? So understanding, same thing like we said with the email, understanding the times and days that most people are going to be on Instagram or TikTok or whatever to interact with you, right? And to look at what you're doing. The impressions and the reach that are available to you. Share of voice is also a big one across social media, and share of voice really just speaks to, essentially out of everybody out there that's trying to do what you do, how much of a percentage of that pie of eyes is looking at you versus the other people that are trying to do it. So what's your share of that pie? And then another one, which I'm sure you guys have seen across some sites on social media before, is follower sentiment. So a lot of people will track and use the data to understand, how do people feel about their social media presence, right? And does it align with the brand that you're trying to make visible? So if you want to be viewed, if your brand across social media is supposed to be one that's, maybe it's a nonprofit and you're trying to be very somber and share information about causes that you're trying to help and trying to be very serious and somber, but the follower sentiment is that you're actually, kind of silly, like, then that you're misaligned, right? And there are ways to track that sentiment. When I said sometimes people can not do this well, you see that all the time when an influencer missteps or a company missteps on their social media. Maybe they put something out they shouldn't, or maybe they interact with a customer comment really poorly. Or even maybe, we see this happen with companies all the time. Maybe the CEO stepped in it somehow, and you can see and track how that, bad behavior by maybe the CEO or CFO of the company will bring down the sentiment of your entire brand across social media, right? So all of these things are really important to understand for success, and also knowing how you're showcasing yourself through organic social. So we're going to do another example. This is the last one, I promise. I'm going to make you think about. So let's say company B is launching a new social media campaign over Facebook, and they're going to go live 2 times a month with a panel of experts about their products to answer questions that they have routinely from customers. And their goal is to increase engagement and followers through this initiative, right? So they're going to try to convince people to say, hey, you want to follow our page because 2 times a month we have these experts that are going to show you, say, for example, it's a makeup company. And they say 2 times a month, we're going to have a panel of experts. It's going to go live on our page, and they are going to give you tips on how to best use our makeup. So follow us to get that information, right? So what KPIs, again, in the chat, and data should they track to see if that social media campaign is successful? So again, I'll give you a couple minutes to think and try to put something in the chat. Or you can always, too, if you have an idea, you can always unmute yourself as well. Maybe while they're thinking too, RJ, I'd be interested to hear, as someone who also works, very heavily in marketing, are these examples ones that you've seen in the real world? Like, do you feel like these are real life examples of things that you've been asked to do in the past, or other marketers have been asked to do?
100% yes. I feel like not a week goes by where I don't get a question from someone about, well, we're sharing our content and no one's seeing it. And like, I had that conversation today, and I'm like, well, what's your follower frequency like? Because if you're putting posts out into the ether, but you're not increasing your followers, then you're in an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is absolutely an on-point example.
Great. Yeah, and it looks like we've got some great ideas too in the chat. So yeah, number of followers, right? Clearly, you want to see if your followers are increasing, so you better be tracking your number of followers. How many people watch the live sessions, and how many followers are gained maybe within 24 hours of that initial session? Absolutely. The number of followers, yep, and time frame, comments, shares, an amount of people attending the live. All great answers and absolutely on point. So KPIs to track for this specific example, you guys nailed it. So percentage increase or growth of followers from before to after. And like we mentioned, maybe another one there is also talking about what was the growth rate of our followership on maybe the 30 days before we took on this campaign. What was the average growth rate versus after we undertook this campaign? What's our growth rate percentage, right? So can we say this campaign has not only helped us gain followers, but it's helped us increase the rate at which we have gained followers in perpetuity into the future, right? So fabulous. Engagement length over 5 minutes, right? So, hey, are people jumping on and actually staying and listening and engaging to the content, which is helping us build our brand with them, right? And then the data we need for that campaign might be something like the days and times when audiences are most likely to be on Facebook, right? It wouldn't make sense to hold a live when nobody in our audience is available to watch it because they're working or they're doing whatever. What devices are they most likely to view on? What copy or design elements are most likely to get them to join, right? So you want to invite people to these lives, you want to tell them about it, right? So how can you create a campaign that is visually engaging to them to get them to want to join? And then how long can we capture their attention, right? So I'll break here for a little tip for all of you as well, is again, when it comes to data, because there is so much of it, automate as much as you possibly can. And there are great automation tools out there for anything you could ever want to automate. One of the easiest ones that I like to use that's free and it's pretty easy to teach yourself is something like Google Data Studio or Google Analytics dashboards. It's just able to bring a lot of information into one space. And a lot of the tools that as marketers we use on a day-to-day basis are Google-based. So they, come into this system really well. And it also has, plugins with other sources as well that you would use routinely. So you can create really nice reports. And there's also templates that you can use based on what you're trying to do. So this is just an example template that I took for this presentation. But, you can see how it aggregates data for us and can easily show us trends. This example is how are our AdWords campaigns functioning and how is that getting us conversions, clicks, what is it doing on our website, right? Because like I said earlier, it's really easy to make decisions off of data if you can see trends. Looking at it from day to day is okay, but it's really hard to make real actions on day-to-day little bits and pieces of data. You want to look for trends and what's happening. Yeah, Sophia, it's a great feature. It can be a little tough depending on how intricate you get. But I've always liked Google Data Studio, but there's lots of other tools as well. And a lot of the platforms, like we're going to talk about here, even have innate platforms inside themselves. So like Facebook has dashboards, Hootsuite has dashboards. They really make it for data people pretty easy to spot those trends and create what you're looking for. So I have some tools here for data analytics. And again, not an exhaustive list by any means whatsoever. I really just kind of put in here. So
Sorry.
I was like, oh, am I doing so poorly, RJ, that you have to stop the recording for me? Not worth sharing. So yeah, so some of the tools that I use routinely, Google Analytics, of course, we've mentioned that a lot. Google Optimize, so that is going to allow you to do those A/B comparisons on your site without having to do a lot of intensive web design work. So before you do the work, you can kind of create a B version of that page in Google Optimize and let it run for a little bit and see which one's going to perform better. There's also heat mapping tools like Hotjar, and there's many others that will show you on each page where are people engaging, where are they getting confused. You can see recordings of people's interactions on your site and use it to help you make improvements. There's obviously many different social media aggregators that have data tracking. So again, you can see how your social media is performing for you in an aggregate, but also each platform has its own data centers as well. SEO tools, there's a million SEO tools, but Screaming Frog, SEMrush, any of them, they're going to tell you how you're performing across search engines and all of the different SEO stuff that's going on, aggregated all in one place for your brand and your company. Many email marketing softwares, right? They're all going to tell you the basics, who engaged with what, where did they go, click-through rate, open rate, all of that. Your AdWords campaigns, there's a ton of data in there. What did I spend? How did the ad perform? All of that. So there are a million different data sources available. This is just some of them. But again, to kind of go back to what we talked about in the beginning, to know what data analytics tools are right for you and for your company, you need to understand what your goals are and your KPIs and your campaigns so that you know upfront what tools you need to figure out if you're being successful in reaching those KPIs or reaching those goals. So how do designers use data, right? So Momentum, I know, talks about marketing and design and kind of how do they come together. So how do designers use data? Data can come into play in many aspects of design, especially in user experience and website design. So, if I'm looking at the experience of my users, or if I'm building a new website or new web pages, right? I want to know, first of all, what are the personas that I'm building it for? I want to know, how do they want me to talk to them? if I have an existing site, I want to see the analytics behind it so I know which pages need to be improved and which ones are converting, for example. I want to know the heat maps. Like I said, where on these pages are people most likely to click, where their eye is going to be. I want to know their purchasing behavior, right? Also, if you're running something like AdWords campaigns, maybe you're running display ads where the visuals are going to be really important, and I have to design a display ad. Well, I want to be able to A/B test those ads and see what is going to work. I want to know what colors and fonts and pictures are going to most likely engage the people that I'm looking for to convert and to click on my ad. And also, of course, using all of the historical data that I have at my disposal to determine, and again, maybe use that predictive modeling to figure out what could my site or what could these campaigns do for me in the future, and how do I improve them to get there. So in the last couple minutes before we maybe take any questions that anyone has or comments, I want to talk a little bit about some of the marketing data trends that we're seeing in 2023. And some of them are not just for this year, they've been happening for a while and they're going to continue to happen. And then we'll talk a little bit about big data and what that means in a little bit more detail. But one of the things that I know, if any of you are currently working marketers, is, with any type of website, is probably like the thorn in your paw, because I know it is for me, is that a key tool in data analytics is going away, which is third-party cookies. And universal Google Analytics is going away in July and is going to be replaced by Google Analytics 4 or GA4. And it's going to change the way that we view web data, because GA4 is less focused on cookies and more focused on event tracking. So a lot of the complaints for marketers who are very used to using universal analytics is that with GA4, they're going to have to learn a completely different way to track their data. And they're also going to have to set up completely new instances of Google Analytics and have to marry the data from platforms in a way that helps them continue to see those trends and understand what their data is saying. It's difficult right now, I will say, for myself. I don't know for any of you if you've encountered GA4 or working closely in it at all. For me, it's been a learning curve for sure, but I'm sure we'll be fine. Another marketing trend that you guys, I'm sure, have heard so much about, especially recently, is the use of artificial intelligence. And like we talked about, more intricate and more advanced predictive algorithms. So like ChatGPT has been the big one recently. I haven't heard too much, I haven't looked into it much. I haven't heard a lot about the data that ChatGPT is collecting, but I guarantee you it's collecting data. And it's probably going to figure out a way to use that data to make additional money. That's just what I haven't heard that. That's just what I would assume. I think they're going to look at what are people typing in there, what questions are people trying to have, that they're using ChatGPT to answer, and they're going to try to figure out a way to monetize that at some point. But I could be wrong. Additional digital touch points are going to be needed as well. And we've seen this as a trend for a long time. As people become more and more inundated with all of these different digital sources that they can interact with, right? We talked about our watches, our phones, our TVs, our tablets, our Google Homes, our Alexas, all these different things that we interact with all the time. You can become really desensitized to, not only the data you're giving, but also like how you're interacting with everything. And so if as marketers, we're going to use this data moving forward, we also need to understand that our buyers' journeys might become longer, right? We might have to have additional digital touch points along the way as people become more and more desensitized and kind of ignore these things until they really need them for some reason. Also, and this is not a new trend by any means, but again, additional better personalization, right? So as a consumer, the expectation is, hey, the more data I give you, the more personalized the stuff that gets put in front of me should be, right? I'm telling you what I want. I'm telling you what I need. I'm telling you how I want to see it and when I want to interact with you. So don't go outside of these data points or I'm going to get ticked off, right? So really understanding your personas and providing them good content at the right time. And then also things like the use of data fabric layers and things that help us aggregate that data into a place, right? With all this data coming from all these different sources, can we pull it into one place and use it to all make sense? I also say this in every presentation that I give, that I predict a major push at some point in the next decade for user privacy in the US.
Yeah.
Europe and Canada already have pretty strict protections for data privacy and how companies can use their data and market to them. Canada or California has something as well that kind of stemmed from how social media was using data of private users. But I can foresee something happening on a federal level if our legislators ever catch up to the way the data is being used. So I would think that something like GDPR is going to be in the US relatively soon. Okay, and then just a quick review of big data, just to kind of have this open conversation, is, should we be afraid of this data? Should we be afraid of giving this much information about ourselves? Does Google know everything about me? Does Facebook know everything about me? Yes and no. Yes, they know a lot about you. You'd probably be shocked at the number of data points that these like big tech giants have on you, and it can be very disconcerting sometimes. But it does have its positives, right? So while it may seem like an invasion of our privacy, big data has actually, from a marketing perspective, helped consumers, because we shouldn't, at least, and don't so much anymore, get inundated with marketing that's not important to us, right? It's much more personalized and usually a much less annoying experience, right? I mean, even the commercials that we see on TV are catered to what we might want to see or need, right? So we're not seeing erroneous stuff as much anymore. And most people that are using big data are marketers like everyone on this call, or, as we will be as we move in further along in our careers. And we aren't doing it with malicious intent. We're doing it and we're using it to provide really good marketing, right? That really works and solves problems and addresses pain points for our personas and our audiences. So from a marketing perspective, data is great, is what I will say. And Sophia said something. Yeah, about data privacy. Yeah, that's a really good point, Sophia, about TikTok. So, I'm sure you all have heard that TikTok is, they're talking about banning TikTok because of its ties to China and the concern about data privacy there. But it's absolutely just a drop in the bucket, right? I mean, like we said at the beginning of this presentation, we are consistently all day giving away bits of data about ourselves in everything that we do. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be digitally, right? It's talking to sales reps. If you have sales reps visit your job, it's going to trade shows, going to conferences, going to networking events, right? All of those things are giving data points on ourselves out there into the ether that can be used. So I'm just going to add to the presentation. I'm not going to go over these, but I've been asked for these before. Just some key terms to equate yourself with when it comes to talking and speaking about data analytics. It's just good to know. But again, we'll keep that in the presentation. That the recording, I'm sure, will be available, and I'm happy to give this presentation out as well if anybody wants it. But with that, that is the end of my presentation. So in the last couple of minutes that we have here, if anybody has any questions or wants to discuss anything that was talked about in this presentation, please feel free to chat or unmute yourself, and I'm happy to talk about it. I see RJ joined us too, who's also a fabulous RJ Thompson, RJ Hebert, other fantastic digital marketer in the Pittsburgh area. So if you have any questions, now's the time, because you've got 3 pretty solid experts here to to answer anything for you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So how do you make money in business with analytics and data and marketing?
Ooh, so do you mean, are you framing that as if it was your position, or how does the company make money through data?
As a position, I'm looking for work. I want to get started in this.
Gotcha. It's a great question. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, people who innately or have learned to know how to collect the appropriate data, synthesize it, and turn it into actionable steps to improve business will have no problem finding freelance work. I can tell you, I'm recruiting for a position on my team right now for a data analyst, sales and marketing data analyst to come in. They are very much in demand, and I think the demand for that role has also grown, just knowing the amount of data that is now available to people. And we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, RJ, that one of the most underutilized tools that any company has at their disposal across the board is data. And very few companies are using the data that they have or could have to its full extent. So if you can come in and do that for a company, you will be invaluable, and you can probably ask for whatever you want because you're going to pay for yourself, right? Yeah, great question.
It's actually, just to supplement that point, when I started my new position in Pitt Health Sciences, they didn't have any marketing data environment to speak of whatsoever until I built it. And now I have incredibly deep, immersive, and broad knowledge of all of the marketing activity occurring across 6 different schools and marketing teams. No one else has that depth of knowledge. So to your point, like, you become a linchpin, so incredibly valuable that, no matter how much they hate you, they don't want to get rid of you because they would lose significant institutional knowledge. So if you want to assert your value very, very quickly, build a data dashboard.
For sure. Great. Any other questions from anyone? Otherwise, I know it's RJ's presentation time. Okay.
Awesome. Well,
Great.
thank you so much, Mackenzie. This was wonderful as usual. And I'll make sure that folks have your recording and slide deck. If they have any questions, they can reach out to you. But otherwise, thanks again.